Maybe it's time to join Team Ulf and just watch this world burn. Well, it's been an interesting season of House of the Dragon to cover. I read Fire and Blood before the season so that all my dick and fart jokes would have some added context. And I had this whole plan to read the stretch of the book that each episode covered and compare them side by side. But with where they've taken this story in Season 3, I'm not sure it was worth it. I am genuinely glad that I read the book, so I could witness just how far they're taking the show away from the original story. And I'm sarcastically glad that I read the book just in time for it to be irrelevant for the show. But now, House of the Dragon has wandered deep into fanfiction territory, leaving the original story behind to tell their own terrible fanfiction girl drama drivel, and even having the gall to take swipes at the creator of this world along the way. When this show, alongside HBO, co-signed a drag queen story hour version of the season, the writing was on the wall in terms of the type of audience they were looking to appeal to. And as soon as I brought that up in one of my episode reviews, HBO began manually claiming each of my videos and demonetizing them. Even though they know these videos fall 100% under the terms of fair use, and much larger channels who don't dare criticize the show, and who use longer video clips in longer videos, don't face any such problem. So, like Rhaenyra, HBO felt the need to silence any criticism of House of the Dragon. But I am undeterred, and House of the Dragon will still get all of the criticism it's due from me. From atrocious pacing to incomprehensibly stupid decisions made by the characters, House of the Dragon Season 3 and the show's creators have lost all sight of what people wanted out of this series. And they've managed to squander this adaptation of the Dance of the Dragons, the only adapted story that George R.R. Martin actually finished. So while Game of Thrones fell flat on its face when it ran out of source material to cover, and we'll see how A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms fares when it faces the same issue soon enough, House of the Dragon had everything it needed to be a good, cohesive story from the first episode to the last. And yet the hacks behind this show only managed to produce one good season to date. House of the Dragon was the very first thing I covered on this channel, and I remember how much hope everyone had after that first season. Especially when it was running at the same time as that debacle, The Rings of Power, House of the Dragon looked set to reclaim that Game of Thrones magic and reign over the realm of big-budget fantasy TV. But after the morons behind the wheel ran the ship aground last season, they spent this season lighting the thing on fire in an attempt to rekindle what they had in Season 1. It's really been a sight to behold. And we'll talk about what they did this season to burn away any goodwill they still had left. But first, here's your obligatory spoiler warning. This video will contain spoilers for the show, obviously, but it will also have some book spoilers. But I'm going to try and avoid any major spoilers from Fire and Blood that the show hasn't gotten to yet. Now, let's get into it, with the good, the bad, and the ugly of Season 3. Now, there's not a whole lot to praise for Season 3, so this is going to be a short section. We can get a lot of it out of the way real fast. The sets, the costumes, the music, the effects, just the overall production quality is fantastic. And some of the acting is very good, and those few performances really stand out against the rest. There are more solid performances to be found, but Matt Smith as Daemon, or Daemond if you listen to one of the writers,
Daemon is a man who is made,
and Tom Glencarney as Aegon constantly steal the show. But performances like those, and a high-budget, high-quality production, set against the backdrop of horrific writing and some less dynamic performances, make House of the Dragon feel like the most expensive high school play in history that brought in a few ringers to carry the show. So even the best aspects of this show do little to overcome the baffling, self-inflicted shortcomings the creators have managed to saddle this series with. Some of the characterization they've added for characters beyond or instead of their relatively skimpy character profiles from the book can be considered an improvement. Take Kristen Cole, for example. I feel like they should have kept the idea of him being a kingmaker and having more influence over the Green's coup and given that more prominence in the show. But I think crafting him more into someone who was hypocritical and who broke every oath he ever took, paired with the imagery of his gleaming white attire being sullied into this dirtied gray color, was a welcome addition to the character. But even then, the show seemed to almost run out of ideas for him this season, relegating him to minimal screen time and a pointless death march. Ormond Hightower was also given much more characterization than his little-mentioned book counterpart. What this show did in developing Ormond as a villain this season was good overall, and it was much needed. With Cole actively trying to get himself killed, Aegon on the run, and Aemond being trapped in this show's own Harrenhal curse, where characters go to stall out for a season, House of the Dragon needed a formidable villain for Season 3. But with an inordinate amount of time spent on his aversion to foul odors that had almost no tangible impact on the story, and his death being played for laughs rather than giving it the weight they had built toward, even all the good work they did with that character was almost for naught. Aegon's pseudo-resurrection arc was good to watch as well, largely fueled by Carney's portrayal of the king brought low. But, unfortunately, that hinged on Sunfire's miraculous, actual resurrection, which was fueled by nothing but stupidity. And Aegon, teamed up with his dragon once more, seems to have forgotten all the character growth the middle portion of this season spent time building up. So, like a nightclub in Colombia, this section has a lot of good but. Ormond's development was good, but. Aegon's arc was good, but. Even the good aspects of Season 3 require some kind of qualifier, or were undone by the end of the season. Moving on to the bad, we have to start with this season's adherence to the Fire and Blood book, or lack thereof. And I'm putting that in this section, but you can easily make the argument that by the end of the season, this belongs in the ugly section, as the show crossed just about every single dividing line you can think of as it sprinted into fanfiction territory. Referring back to the book to compare the show's events became almost pointless after episode 2. I got almost nothing out of doing that again until the finale and the Battle of Tumbleton they began to stray so far from the book. I realize there's not a lot of granular detail to pull out from those book segments between Rhaenyra's taking of King's Landing and the Battle of Tumbleton for them to spend time on. But there's an easy solution for that. Speed the fuck up. We'll revisit this later on when we talk about this season's pacing, you can be sure of that. But there's so much more for them to cover between the Battle of Tumbleton and the events they're going to end this show with. Everything they left for Season 4, that's where you can take your foot off the pedal and zoom in on more interesting events, developments, and evolving relationships. This was the wrong season for them to bring things to a crawl. The Battle of Tumbleton should have happened around the midway point of the season. At an absolute minimum, they spent far too much time on repetitive scenes that barely moved things along, leaving out better material they could have adapted or kicking the can down the road into Season 4. I don't care if you enjoyed them. We didn't need the 73rd Small Council meeting scene and the 85th Rhaenyra and Alicent scene. We just didn't. And while we were spending time in the same rooms, having the same conversations, the ground campaign from Fire and Blood, one of my favorite parts of the book, was basically cut out entirely, limited to a few post-battle celebration scenes and endless marching that felt like it went nowhere. The war and battles between the Rivermen and the Starks versus Cole and the Lannisters and the Hightowers was something this show sorely missed, and they should never be forgiven for minimizing it in the way they did. And you can miss me with the argument that people watching are asking for a one-for-one recreation of the book. No one's asking for that. If you want the book, just read the book. As if there's no value in seeing a story in a different medium. You have the comic books, why do you need a Batman movie? Do you hear how dumb you sound? That's like if I told you, bro, I told you about the Odyssey. Why do you need to go see it in theaters? I swear, if the people that argue those points didn't have their straw man, then they'd have no one left to listen to them. There are good changes you can make to source material, and there are bad changes. And the creators of House of the Dragon deal almost exclusively in the latter. Fundamentally changing characters' motivations and relationships, or the events that define them or alter the course of their storyline, is a risky game. And when that's paired with bad writing that makes some characters and their actions incomprehensibly stupid, you make the story worse. And if you're not here to produce a story greater than or equal to the original, what are you doing here? Take Sunfire's resurrection, which does belong in this section, for example. Beyond the glaring problem that its nature is, as of yet, unexplained, this came after so many prominent characters told the audience that it was dead. They belabored that point. So are we supposed to just forget that all of these characters were wrong about Sunfire and decided not to destroy Sunfire's defenseless body to make sure? Or are we just going to think that those characters are dumb and everything they do in the story now needs to be questioned? And in the end, all that change did was it made Sunfire's survival an unnecessary twist that brought Aegon back into the fold, which Sunfire didn't need to be dead in the first place to do, and the news of it unsettled Rhaenyra in the finale, which just precipitated this schizophrenic turn in her character that led to her announcing herself as a godlike chosen figure. So that one little change fundamentally unrooted the show's most prominent character, derailing any kind of natural character arc she was on, even if that was also already stupid. You can see what George R.R. Martin was talking about with Toxic Butterflies. Changes like this, in the hands of poorly skilled writers employed far above their station, are poison to a good story. And we really can't discuss anything else in that vein without moving on to the next section. So now we've arrived at the downright ugly aspects of Season 3.
You, yourself, ugly.
The pacing this season was simply atrocious. Years ago, I called this show the House of Dragging Its Feet, and that was a painfully apt nickname this season. I know they've had to deal with some schedule shakeups, needing to wrap up the ending to Season 2 that got cut short, and adapting to an 8-episode season instead of 10. But, if anything, that should lead to injecting some urgency into matters, not slowing things down. Yet, somehow, they decided to bring this season to an absolute crawl. Weighed down by repetitive scenes, character storylines sprawling out of control, and a whole lot more talking than doing. Some people will say that this season was hampered by them having to use the first 2 episodes to wrap up Season 2. But let's be real, even with those episodes, this 8-episode season had about 4 episodes worth of content, stretched out to fill runtime. So much of this season ended up feeling like they were just killing time until the finale. Episodes 3 through 7 could have been 2 episodes, 1.5 if there was such a thing as half episodes. Others will say that they were taking their time for character development and political maneuvering. No, when you're having the same scenes with the same characters, having nearly the same conversation, episode after episode after episode, you're not developing shit. You've stalled out. But with them covering a skimpy stretch of the book and dragging it out, how did they ever fill the time? I'm so glad you asked. By inventing storylines and fluffing up irrelevant characters. Corlys never gets kidnapped by Ormond Hightower. Alicent is never sent to kill Aemond. Aemond is never in recovery at Harrenhal. Helena wasn't pregnant. There's never any hunt for Sheepstealer's rider. Rhaenyra never indulged in Myssario's taco box munch. And entangled in many of those superfluous, contrived storylines are characters that are basically non-factors in the book story, either having always been non-factors or having become non-factors by this point. Let's call them invalids. Rhaena is so irrelevant in the book that they had to have her consume another character's storyline, Nettles. In the book, Nettles actually served a purpose, posing the question of whether or not you actually needed dragon's blood to become a dragon rider. A topic this show hasn't even broached, despite having Adam in a similar situation. But Rhaena and her storyline undo that dynamic, and go on to serve no real purpose in the story by the end of the season. Rhaena contributed in a way to Rhaenyra's son's death, but they didn't even have those 2 characters have a real conversation after Rhaenyra learned of that. Like, they left the actual, interesting, meaningful character work that resulted from their twisted adaptation out of the end product. They want to change the original story, but won't even explore where those changes leave the characters. They're so inept, it's just absurd. I want to adapt this story and make some changes. Okay, let's see where those changes go. Well, why would we do that? It's dumbfounding and disheartening that these people are employed, much less working on such a big production. Mysaria is not overly important in the book, but this show gave her a lot of screen time, just so she could give Rhaenyra bad advice that sounded good and virtuous, and so Rhaenyra could be a sometime lesbian. Alice Rivers is mysterious in Fire and Blood, and she plays kind of the same game with Aemond, but she's still an afterthought. But in this show, that afterthought was foisted to prominence. She's even given a completely made-up place in the lore and history of this world. And even Alicent, who has nothing to do in the book story at this point, still has to be treated like a top 3 character. Just because the creators are still patting themselves on the back for making this whole story about her relationship with Rhaenyra that they made up. So, not much source material? No problem. We'll just make shit up. And in the hands of better writers, making a meal out of this bare-bones stretch of the book would be doable. But in the hands of these writers, we somehow ended up with just worse bones. Speaking of bones, the writers' commitment to sexual assault scenes is just disturbing. They only ever made it like 2 episodes without one or mentioning one. And isn't it odd that all of those scenes of assault against women were just horrible, but the one scene like that against a guy is played for laughs? Makes you think. Even the consensual stuff was unbearable. They managed to completely contrive not one, but 2 love triangles this season. 3, if you include Daemon in Rhaenyra and Myzaria's taco buffet. Daemon is the one sleeping with Myzaria in the book, by the way. So that action needed to be given over to Ray in this adaptation, of course. And those lame love triangles were just the cherry on top of the shit mountain of interpersonal drama this show wouldn't stop shoveling on top of us, most of it made up for the show. Obviously, you need some of that kind of drama in the show, but it needs to be reined in and it needs to be well done. Things these writers aren't capable of. And it just speaks to where these creators' heads are at with this series. They've completely missed the point of the story and what people want to see out of it, while turning it into a nonsensical, soapy girl drama. But my biggest gripe of all with this season, I guess, boils down to the immersion factor. And a big component in immersion is believable characters and character choices. And the characters and their decisions this season have been so off the charts stupid that I couldn't stay immersed in this even if it was a swimming pool with $1 million at the bottom of it. Watching this season, you're at risk of pulling something in your neck with all the head shaking and shrugging you do watching these characters. And the queen of stupidity herself reigned over all of them, Rhaenyra Tardgaryen. Let's just run down some of the stupid things Rhaenyra did in this season alone, in no particular order. And forgive me if I missed some things. The sheer volume of stupid decisions makes it hard to even remember all of them at this point. She sent her sworn enemy, Alicent, who had been lying to her and actively trying to escape, off with 4 guards to draw out her warrior prince son, who, for all Rhaenyra knows, is accompanied by the largest dragon in the world. A nonsensical assassination plot to begin with. She minimized the plight of the common folk, opting to light candles for a missing teenage girl instead of doing anything substantive.
I don't know what you want me to do about it.
My queen.
She slept with one of her advisors after surrounding herself with a bunch of weak advisors. She alienated the wealthy lords of King's Landing, alienated nearly all of her dragon riders, and alienated her own hand, who commands the greatest fleet in the realm, and is one of the few powerful, stalwart allies she had. She lost the gold cloaks that delivered her the throne. She let people backtalk her. She ignored basically everything Daemon ever suggested, while leaning almost entirely on a former hooker who deals in deception. And all that before she had the High Septon murdered and announced herself as a prophesied god queen to a horde of people that just want some food and to not get stabbed in their own city. And when she wasn't doing something bafflingly stupid, she was sitting on her ass holding fruitless meetings. All this when she was in the strongest position she had ever been in. All of this was her own doing. Even though they were trying to tell a story with this show about how her father and other men in positions of power screwed her over and brought about circumstances that put her in an impossible position. Despite how much they had the character blame others,
Fucking Viserys!
all of this falls squarely on Rhaenyra's shoulder pads. They wanted to make her story tragic, but there's no empathy coming from the audience when it's all someone's own doing. And it's not interesting to watch. It's just frustrating, tedious, and baffling. Especially when we've now had 2 seasons of other characters basically yelling at her to do something, anything, while she scheduled more meetings. Rhaenyra's reign in the book is equally as troubled, and her story in Fire and Blood is that she was not a good ruler. But whereas the book managed to portray her reign as troubled and doomed without making her look brain-dead stupid, these writers were not capable of the same. And to cap it all off, her sudden turn toward embracing her persona as a prophesied chosen one after news of Sunfire's revival, after the death of 2 sons saw her merely sit on her hands, was jarring, if not schizophrenic. Rhaenyra, the focal point of this series, became one of television's worst characters in record time this season. To the point where people are now rooting for the murdering, rapist, former terrible king, Aegon. But hey, it required some tearing down others rather than building people up, but at least they finally made it harder to find a side to support between Team Green and Team Black. Maybe it's time to join Team Ulf and just watch this world burn. For all the prettiness on the surface, when you do just a little bit of digging, the ugly soul at the heart of this show quickly surfaces. And if that doesn't belong in the ugly section, I don't know what does. Viewership for this season's premiere was down 8% from last season's premiere, a not unexpected decline. And through 4 episodes, the show remained near the top of the streaming charts, trailing only Love Island USA. But I'll be very interested to see how those numbers held as more episodes rolled out and the stupidity kicked into full gear. Viewers on Rotten Tomatoes have Season 3 at a 64%, down 7 points from Season 2 and 18 points from Season 1. And I strongly believe that 64% is only being propped up by 3 episodes, the first 2 borrowed from Season 2's story and the finale. Because only 3 episodes, less than half of this season, were even palatable. And the people have this season at a 5.4 over on Metacritic. As for me, this season was an absolute hate watch that bordered on straight comedy at times. Which really sucks, because the world of Ice and Fire is probably my second favorite fantasy world. And in the end, it's a real shame where they've taken House of the Dragon. Because the story and this show touch upon greater themes found in the world of Ice and Fire. One's ripe for storytelling. Characters torn between their love and the duties they would have to betray for that love. Prophecies coming true in unexpected ways. Characters getting the one thing they've always wanted, only to find that it's robbed them of everything else. And, I mean, this is the only story that George R.R. Martin has actually finished. And instead of staying true to his story, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars crafting and filming snide, snarky scenes just to stick it to him for criticizing the show, while butchering the story in the process. This was a terrible season. But wait, there's more, as there's one more season left to go for House of the Dragon. With what's left of the story to tell in the Dance of the Dragons and the big, epic events still to come, you're inclined to think Season 4 couldn't possibly be as bad as this season or the last one. With these writers, though, I'm sure they'll find a way to fuck it all up. But come what may, I'll be here for Season 4 to give it the old Hate Watchers treatment. Now, though, I want to give a big thank you to everyone who made it this far and who made it through the season with me. I really enjoyed covering it with all of you, reading all your comments and hearing what you had to say. Even if the show has been trash, I've had fun with it, and I hope you did too. That's what hate watching is about after all. Also, keep in mind that I do these same kind of episode reviews for the Rings of Power, so make sure to subscribe to Hate Watchers so you don't miss that continuous shit show when it returns in 3 months. They're releasing that season in a batch of 4 episodes, followed by 2 more batches of 2 to manipulate the viewership metrics, which makes it exceedingly hard to cover in the same manner as a show that releases 1 episode a week. But I'll find a way. Now I want to hear from you. How are you rating this season? Will you be back for the next one? Has this season made you lose every last shred of faith you had in these creators? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to Hate Watchers for reviews of other current shows and movies. Also, keep an eye out for a video of the funniest clips from this season of House of the Dragon. Thank you for fighting back against this reign of stupidity with me today, and I'll catch you on the next one.